Collective, Reynolds served as the president and CEO of the American Hospital Association's Institute for Diversity and Health Equity, and held leadership roles at prominent organizations like Johns Hopkins, Emory Healthcare, Ohio Health, and Optum, a United Health company. Please join me in welcoming Duane.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, thank you for sticking around for the final session today. I'm very appreciative of your interest in the topic, and hopefully you've had a great conference thus far and have learned some new things. So, as she mentioned, I've been in healthcare administration really for over 25 years now, and I am now doing absolutely what I was meant to do in this field, which is to help advance health equity and belonging across organizations. So having seen many perspectives, I have thought about the solutions that I think will help bridge some of the divide that we have that is broader than healthcare, but is certainly applicable. So let's get into it. So our learning objectives for today's session are first to define cancel culture and really consider its pros and cons, to explain calling in versus calling out, and to consider your position based off of what you learned today. So believe it or not, Webster's dictionary actually defines cancel culture, which is the removing or canceling of support for individuals and their work due to an opinion or action that is deemed objectionable. And so calling people out is really about bringing attention to something that you perceive to be a slight or something that you completely disagree with. I want to start by sharing a story in healthcare because we are healthcare leaders in this room. So I work with a very large client, a large health system in the Northeast, and I coach their CEO and their C-suite team around these topics. And through that coaching process, they had an incident that arose. A physician, a very prominent surgeon who had been with the organization probably 20 years or more, who had a thriving practice, very renowned for what he did. Huge patient base, huge number of staff that were built through this particular surgeon's work. So on a given day, the surgeon had scheduled surgeries, and on this particular day, his device representative, who was often with him during these surgeries, let him know that he was not going to be able to be at that current surgery. So he sent him a text telling him as much, and he said, "My colleague will be covering for me." And he mentioned the colleague's name. And then he sent a picture of a monkey. And the physician responded and said, "Not black enough." His colleague was a black woman. Interestingly enough, she showed up for the surgery that day. And I didn't know this, but apparently it's kind of standard practice if you've developed a relationship with these reps to hand them maybe your cell phone while you're doing surgery. So he handed her that cell phone, as he normally does with that other rep who happens to be a white male. And for whatever reason, she looked in his phone and she found that message. So she reported that to her company, and then she reported it to the hospital with an expectation that they would do something about it. Okay? So I was in the midst of my coaching process when this issue came up. The CEO was very, very adamant about taking action against this surgeon. I'm going to pause the story here, and we're going to come back to it, because what I'm going to talk to you about now is going to give you some food for thought in how you might handle a situation such as the one that I mentioned. So cancel culture has really hit hard in 2021. As you see here, we have some celebrities that have been canceled based off of things that they've done. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't know who DaBaby was prior to his cancellation because of his homophobic remarks during one of his concerts. Ellen DeGeneres, who, for all of the good that she's done in our world, because of what her company was embroiled in, she has essentially been canceled. And then we have Chrissy Teigen, who was canceled after cyberbullying allegations. So cancel culture has become a thing that you do on the internet, and it can actually drive views and likes, and people get involved in these conversations, sometimes based off of their ego, sometimes based off of sort of higher moral ground and proclamation. So there was another pretty big incident that led to the firing of Sharon Osbourne. And oftentimes what I've found is that issues of racism tend to be a scapegoat for cancel culture. So I want to share this brief video about this incident, and then we'll dissect a moment.
Never seen anything come out of you other than, if I don't know, I'm willing to learn. If it comes off a certain way, I stand corrected.
Right.
That's the only thing I've seen.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who may feel that you, while you're standing by your friend, it appears that you give validation or safe haven to something that he has uttered that is racist, even if you don't agree? Am I saying it right? Okay,
I don't know what he's uttered that's racist. I'm not trying to slide out of this one.
Right.
I don't know. Tell me, what has he uttered that's racist?
Wednesday's episode of The Talk got intense as Cheryl Underwood confronted her co-host Sharon Osbourne for supporting Piers Morgan after he made controversial comments towards Meghan Markle following her sit-down interview with Oprah. Throughout the conversation, Sharon became very defensive over her friendship with Piers and even lashed out at Cheryl. Take a look.
I feel even like I'm about to be put in the electric chair because I have a friend who many people think is a racist, so that makes me a racist. And for me, at 68 years of age, to have to turn around and say, I ain't racist.
Right.
What's it got to do with me? Okay, how can I be racist about anybody? How can I be racist about anybody or anything in my life? How can I?
Well, I tell you,
what?
We'll be right
Well,
back.
what?
We have more topics, so don't go away.
And I think we should stop this the break. I am asking you, this is the situation.
Yes.
You tell me where you have heard him say, educate me, tell me when you have heard him say racist things. Educate me, tell me.
It is not the exact words of racism. It's the implication and the reaction to it. To not want to address that because she is a black woman and to try to dismiss it or to make it seem less than what it is, that's what makes it racist. But right now, I'm talking to a woman who I believe is my friend. And I don't want anybody here to watch this and say that we're attacking you for being racist. And for that, if I articulated
I think it's
anything,
too late. I think that seed's already sown.
But that is why I'm saying for me. I'm saying for me. For me. I thought I was asking a question about the perception for other people. That's why I prefaced it with, I've never heard you utter anything racist,
please. Cheryl,
but I have felt that Pierce was racist in his stance against Meghan Markle. And the last time he was on this show, I said as much. I said it when he was on this show.
And what was his answer to you?
He didn't feel that it was racist. He didn't feel that the racial statements that he was making were racist. But I was talking to him.
Okay, answer me this one, okay? Because I don't know. I don't understand. If he doesn't like someone, and I think this is for everybody who is born white, if Piers doesn't like someone and they happen to be black, does that make him a racist?
No. No.
That's a no.
No.
Right. So why can't it be he just doesn't like her? Why does it have to be racist?
It's almost like, oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl.
No, you go
It's
ahead.
almost like yesterday when you were talking, Mrs. O, it sounded like he was really upset about, what you were saying is a royalist. Like, he is just so, like, deep into
he is.
honoring the crown and honoring, and do I agree with what he said? No, like you.
No, I
Do
don't
I
agree.
think he should have walked off set? No. Do I think he should have sat there and listened to his other co-hosts like we're doing right now and having a conversation and learning from each other? I think that's what evolution, corrective evolution is about.
Can you advance to the next slide? It's not working here. So, in viewing that, there were a lot of things that went wrong with that conversation. But what I thought about after I watched it was a real conversation that a lot of people are engaged in, if they're willing to engage in that conversation. But I didn't like the fact that Sharon Osbourne was gone, because it could be an indication that if you have strong opinions one way or the other, you can immediately be canceled without nuance to the circumstance or nuance to her understanding and her worldview and perspectives that actually contribute to her stance, okay? Now, what I would have probably rather have seen would be that conversation to occur before they got on air so that they could actually ferret out some of the real feelings there, and perhaps come to a different moment of learning. Though, I mean, that was probably one of the highest rated shows that they've had because of that reason. So maybe there's some merit, but in general, I think it's more appropriate to think about some of these conversations behind the scenes, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. So, cancel culture and call-out culture are synonymous. Calling out is really about publicly shaming someone if you disagree with their standpoint without really thinking about their humanity. And again, the nuance of the situation. Calling out presumes guilt, that they are automatically wrong because they believe and take a certain stance. It also assumes essentialism, which is the behavior was bad, therefore the person is bad. Okay? The behavior was bad, therefore the person is bad. Pseudo-intellectualism. I've been guilty of this. It really is about ego, claiming your own moral high ground, that you may be woke and understand more than others. Okay? That the person is, or their action is unforgivable. So no apology is going to be good enough to rectify the situation. And then lastly, contamination. So guilty by association. And I'm going to share an example of guilty by association and the damage that it can really do. But first, before we jump into that example, if you all can, at your tables, I want you to answer these 3 questions. Now, This is going to take a little bit of courage, okay? Courage in this type of work is leaning into something that may be uncomfortable. And what I want you all to understand and take away is that in order to move through and get to the other side of this conversation around race, around other types of isms, you have to be willing to walk through the fire to get to the other side where there's water. So, having said that, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk with the people at your group and answer these questions.
But you're on camera, which is right there.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
I can follow. I mean, we can follow you. We've got a joystick, but
Okay. Gotcha.
just enough fun.
Thank you. All right, about 1 more minute. 1 more minute. Okay, if I can have everybody's attention, back up at the front. If you'll make your last few comments here. Okay, what I'd like you to do, I'd love to have maybe 1 to 2 volunteers. One volunteer where someone's perhaps canceling of you or you canceling them didn't result in change. And then one example of where canceling perhaps did result in change. So if I have any brave audience members, one example where canceling worked, one example where canceling perhaps didn't have. Yes, sir.
Hello, John Rhodes, Auctioner Health Administrative Fellow. So I brought up the example where in my graduate degree program, we had superlatives at the end of the school year. And one of the superlatives that an individual received was most likely to complain to a professor. This individual was a Black woman, and I had known her prior through a summer program I was in. And so she publicly called me out in a group me and said, you know, this is, you know, just perpetuating the stereotype of mad Black woman, you know, how could you not see this? You know, this makes me feel this way. And for me, it was, you know, a difficult situation because it's someone who I was a friend of and considered someone I could trust. So it was a situation where I think it could have been handled one-on-one rather than in a group meet with other peers. And so moving forward, you know, I reached out to her. I said, hey, you know, I'm sorry that this superlative was chosen for you. It wasn't meant to do any harm. And after that situation occurred, I spoke with the other class representatives, and I was like, you know, obviously this isn't a superlative that we need to use moving forward. So after that year, we didn't, you know, have that superlative on the options. And I think, you know, it was difficult because on one side of things, you know, I was just on the committee that, I guess, administrated that superlative. Whereas on the other hand, she could have saw me as like being on the committee and not pointing that out. So it was just a learning opportunity for me as well as others. And we move forward and, you know, just learn from it. So,
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that story. I think one of the key things there is that she had a conversation with you. Was the conversation in private? No, public? It was on what? Group me. Okay, group text. Okay. So, that's interesting. Okay. Younger generation. So, she had a conversation with you, and it caused you to pause and really think about what had been done. So, she publicly called you out on this group chat. So, in that very instance, it worked because you had enough awareness to think about the implications. Perhaps you even thought about from your own perspective as a minority and what that might have meant. I want to hear now from someone who was perhaps canceled and it didn't change your opinion. And I want to hear why. If anybody's willing to. So I want to share one last example, and I'm going to read a little bit here. How many of you are familiar with the Dave Chappelle controversy that's been going on? A few of you? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. Chappelle has a new Netflix series on. I think it's called The Closer. And he essentially makes remarks about LGBTQ. Quite frankly, he makes remarks about every demographic, right? This is his shtick. So, you know, it's his shtick. But the trans community in particular has taken issue with his remarks. And so recently, Dave Chappelle was, I guess, the MC at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. And here's what he said. Welcome to Ohio to all the inductees. I would like to apologize. And this apology was in reference to the controversy about the Netflix documentary. And then his next words were, nah, I'm just effing with you. So, he got laughs, certainly. But what went on afterwards and what was communicated in this article that I read is that the LGBT community looked through tears at news of the latest killings of transgender Americans in an already deadly year. 2 more women around this time who were the 42nd and 43rd trans people to lose their lives in 2021 because of who they are. And so I have been a fan of Dave Chappelle. I also understand that comedy can certainly bring light in a different way to issues that our society is facing. He has taken a pretty firm stance that understanding has to go both ways, and he sort of sees comedians as a group that has been attacked based off of their art and craft. I think where he may have failed to really think through, and perhaps hasn't had some of the perspective, is that, number one, since 2020, trans murders have increased by 105%. 105% of a very small population of people. The average lifespan for transgender women in particular is around 32. 32. I also think he took a perspective from a place of privilege. As a man, as someone who's wealthy and can say these things, and his money caused Netflix not to cancel, right? So when I really think about it, when I stepped back and thought about it, yeah, I watched it. I also think he made some good points about being able to dialogue and communicate, but there are real ramifications for some communities here. This is life or death for that community, because what it does is it enables a culture of discrimination that ultimately can lead to violence, right? So there's sort of this hierarchy. Violence, genocide being the highest of the most egregious things. But down below, there are jokes. They're, pretending that the life experience of these individuals isn't real. It may not be our life experience, but it's real to them, right? So in this instance, canceling could have been appropriate, perhaps. And so it really leads to this conundrum of, what do we actually do when we want people to be able to express and give their perspectives? We have to understand their perspectives, however, to be able to talk through and perhaps lend an alternative viewpoint, okay? There was a transgender woman who Dave Chappelle was actually friends with. She was a comedian. She came to his defense, and she was berated on social media, so much so that she committed suicide. So when I talk about, contamination, so she inserted herself to defend him, and it led to her ultimately committing suicide. So this stuff is real. It's not just something that happens on social media. There are real life ramifications for it. So what are some of the pros and cons of cancel culture? First, it allows marginalized people to really seek accountability where otherwise they may not have been able to, because they didn't have a voice, they didn't have a seat at the table. Second, it gives that voice to the disenfranchised and less powerful people, okay? In the first part, the justice system is failing them, so they have another outlet within which to seek some type of accountability. And the internet has really given marginalized groups the ability to do that. And thirdly, it is seen as a new form of boycott, right? If you can harm someone financially, then maybe they'll think twice. And this was the case with DaBaby and not being able to do his Lollapalooza concert, right? But there are cons. It can amount to online bullying and incite violence, right? It may not bring about the social change that you're looking to have happen. For instance, the conversation with the faculty member and the student. I'm not sure that the social change that perhaps that student was really looking to have happen, happened. And then finally, it could be a slippery slope that leads to intolerance in democratic societies. So in order to have democracy, we must have the ability to communicate, to have conversation, to tussle with challenging issues. Okay? So this is what cancel culture really looks like when it happens in a social media environment. Objectionable behavior. There's a collective consciousness of people on one side or the other side of the issue. Censorship begins to happen. Reputation damage. There's shaming that occurred verbally or written. And ultimately, that person is banned in some way. Okay? So I want to share this short video from our former president that talks about cancel culture and, again, some of the considerations. Or not.
You know, this idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. Yep. People who do really good stuff have flaws. Right. People who you are fighting may love their kids and, you know, share certain things with you. And I think that one danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses, Malia and I talk about this. Yara goes to school with my daughter. But I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or used the wrong verb, or then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself. Because, man, you see how woke I was? I called you out. I'm going to get on TV, watch my show, watch Grownish. You know, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far. That's easy to do.
So the real question is, what if instead of calling people out, we called them in? So what does that mean, calling in? It's privately addressing and holding a conversation with a person. It is understanding nuance of the situation, understanding that that human being has their own lens within which they view the world. And we all have been a part of a larger system in which we are conditioned to think a certain way, right? Calling in assumes that people are inherently good, but that we all make mistakes. You actually are going to check your ego, which is tough for us to do in this day and age when things are so divided, right? And we want to be in our gut. We want to be what we feel like is on the right side of history. But sometimes ego can drive that. That everyone deserves grace and forgiveness. It is the biggest piece of how we bridge this divide. Grace and forgiveness, okay? And that people have different frames of reference and may not know what they don't know. They may not know what they don't know. So There are times when one or the other, calling in or calling out, might be appropriate. So when we're trying to call in, if there's an opportunity to explore an issue deeper, right? For instance, with the student, it wasn't just about the video that you showed. It was about something deeper for that person, right? And we have to get to what the deeper issue is, what his experiences might have been that actually caused the reaction. But he didn't give you the opportunity to do that. When you want to seek to understand and learn more, genuinely want to seek to understand and learn more, you'll call a person in. If you want to imagine a different perspective, possibilities, or outcomes. So when I think about the world that I want for my niece, my nephew, the people behind me, it's a different world than what we live in today, right? There's got to be something better on the other side. So I want to call people into this conversation. The situation provides for multiple perspectives and encourages a paradigm shift. Focused on reflection and not reaction, and it's not just a suggestion to get your point across, okay? You may need to call out people, however, when you need to let someone know that their words or actions are unacceptable and will not be tolerated. So if there truly is an incident where, perhaps it's a public forum and someone is saying something very egregious, you got to stop that behavior in its tracks, okay? We need to interrupt in order to prevent further harm. So with Dave Chappelle, there's harm there that I don't think he really understands. And the trans community and the LGBTQ community, for that matter, are trying to prevent further harm. If your actions will likely feel hard and uncomfortable, but are necessary to protect everyone's interests. So we're thinking about the collective, right? We may have to stop and call a person out. And then when you need to hit the pause button and break momentum of a conversation. So when you have to do or have to exhibit calling out, it can be done respectfully. And here are some of the phrases that might help you in that conversation. Wow, nope, ouch. I need to stop you right there. Or, maybe you want to think this one through a bit and speak about it later, right? I wonder if you've considered the impact of your words. By the way, I'm not great at this. It takes some patience and time with yourself, and sometimes our initial reaction is something other than that. But these are some phrases that if we practice, we can utilize them in the middle of times when we feel that tension. Calling a person in actually can still address behaviors. So I don't want you to think that just because you're calling them in, that they're not going to be held accountable for some of their behavior. So some phrases to help with that. What is making you most fearful or nervous or uncomfortable? Because there's something behind why a person is defensive. I was having a conversation this morning with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the fact that you are shifting a person's paradigm. You're shifting their comfort, what they've always known to be the world. And it's scary to come out of that. It's scary to come out of it because you think that that is the world as you see it and perceive it. And if you do something different, some people think that they may lose on the other side of that. And it's not a zero-sum game, okay? So I love this quote here. When you ask people to give up hate, you have to be there for them when they do. So if you get a person to be called into a conversation, you have to understand that they are approaching from a place of perhaps not knowing, a place of ignorance, a place of maybe they've never heard or been in the shoes or perspective of you or anyone else. So you just have to understand that. And if you really want them to change, you have to be there for them, and you have to help them along that journey. So this is the story of Daryl Davis. Daryl is a blues musician, but he has a really interesting hobby. So if you can't see from back there, Daryl is a black man. Daryl has befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan for over 30 years. And what he has said is that once he gets to know individuals and they can see him for who he is and he can see them for who they are, which is about seeing each other's humanity, then oftentimes they will figure out that their hate may have been misguided. And so Daryl has been able to get over 200 Ku Klux Klan members to give up their robes. And he keeps their robes as a symbol of getting to a place of releasing hate. So my question is, what would it take for you to do what Daryl did? Really tough, especially for someone who is in a marginalized group. Because for some of us, it can be traumatizing to have to convince people to treat us like we feel like we should be treated, to see our humanity, right? So think about this as you have conversations with people who are part of minority marginalized groups, that it really isn't their responsibility to teach you. Sometimes people will choose to do that, and that's great. I choose to do it because it's my life's work. But not everybody is going to be in that space. So you have to recognize that and go on your own journey, right? Go on your own journey to figure out some of these things. Talk with other white people who have gone on their journey and figure out, what they did in order to make a move. When you're calling people in, there's a very simple model here called ACE, which is paying attention to the individual in the context of the situation. Read their body language. What makes them a little tense in the course of that conversation? I'd say study them before you get into the conversation. Understand where they came from. Is it a small rural town that perhaps had no black people in it? Perhaps they have a member of their family that is from the LGBTQ community, so maybe they have a little bit of perspective there, right? But you gotta understand and pay attention to context and situation. Next, make an authentic connection, to lean in and listen. Daryl wouldn't have been able to do what he did without an authentic connection, because people can see right through the BS, and they'll immediately sort of shut down. But if you authentically engage in the conversation, then you might be able to get somewhere. And then finally, demonstrating empathy, which ultimately is about fostering trust. A call in is a call out done with love. So, before I read this quote, I'll tell you what happened with the story with the health system that I was working with. So, again, the CEO was ready to get rid of this surgeon. And for those of you that run organizations, you know that the physicians are revenue drivers. In addition, they're there to take care of patients, but the reality is they are the source of revenue for the organization. So hospital systems are going to need to start to grapple with the fact that individuals who hold racist views and who exercise racist behaviors are part of all of our hospital systems. And if you think that that is not true, you're sadly mistaken, okay? So, knowing that that person is there, knowing that he was a high revenue producer, I said, let's think about this a moment. I said, you could immediately terminate this individual. I said, but what happens to him after termination? He goes down the street. He's a high revenue producing physician. You're probably not sharing information openly about the situation for fear of being sued. So now he's down the street, still in the same community, still holding the same racist behaviors and beliefs. And so you gave the problem to someone else. I said, the other thing is, maybe you should think about how this could be a catalytic moment for your organization. Maybe you could talk to this physician and try to understand what was behind that. What was the behavior that drove that? And what did he think it was accomplishing? And how might that actually, those beliefs, hurt the people that he's there not to harm? And if that physician is willing to do the hard work of reconciling his own racism, racist behavior, then maybe, just maybe, this is your opportunity to utilize him as a spokesperson for how you change, how you take on these issues, how the organization wraps its arms around an individual to help to reform this type of thought and behavior. I said, but he has to be willing to go there. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He lawyered up, and he was terminated. That was the appropriate point of cancellation, right? So there are times when cancellation is appropriate. But this is nuanced work that you have to think about all the implications of immediately dismissing someone that can go down the street and continue to harm. Okay? So your capacity to allow people to live a truth completely opposite of yours without shutting off your compassion for them is a reflection of how powerful your love is. It's a reflection of how powerful your love is, your love for humanity, your love and ability to see the humanness in someone else and understand that none of us are perfect. And what I have found doing this work, that in the end, love is the only way. Love is the only way through it. So I want to thank you for sticking around for this presentation. I love to do this at the end of my presentations, to have you share one word and one action that you plan to take as a result of hearing this conversation. So if anybody would be willing to share. One word about your impression and one action. The one word could be, this is a horrible presentation. Yes. Forgive. Forgive. Yeah, if we can forgive, doesn't mean we forget, but if we can forgive, we have the capacity to move forward. Okay? Another word. Anybody else? Understanding. You are on your journey. You own your journey. Perfect. You have to be accountable for your journey. And your why is bigger than you. It's about your children. It's about your grandchildren. It's about the next generation, right? That's why you lean into this work, okay? Anyone else? Yes, in the back.
Thank you. I appreciate this. I guess that's appreciation is my word. And my action is I love the choice to call people in or out on purpose instead of just having one reflex that I had prior to this.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have been stuck in our reflex about these situations. Good. Okay. Well, I thank you so much for your time and energy, and I hope you've had a wonderful conference, and go on your journeys to change the world. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, take care.
All right. I know all of you are busy wanting to catch your flights. We have officially come to the end of the 2021 Organizational and Leadership Excellence Conference. And again, I can't thank you all enough for just being here, showing up, and your dedication and participation to listening to all of the great, amazing speakers, all of the sessions. I mean, Duane, thank you for just some wonderful messages to close out this year's theme of Leadership Redefined. I think there are so many key takeaways that we've heard from every session, and I hope you all take that back. And as I spoke to you at the beginning on Tuesday yesterday, really reflect and take that back to your organization and commit to what you're going to do. In the donation and transplantation world, we would always say, what are you going to do by next Tuesday? So I ask each of you, what are you going to do by next Tuesday, a takeaway that you learn from here, and try and go and implement change within your own organization. So with that, you'll be receiving an evaluation later this afternoon. We truly, truly appreciate your feedback. It will help us drive our program for next year. And I know I've heard wonderful comments so far, and I want to thank you all for the immediate feedback. But if you have anything else you would love to share, please fill out those evaluations, and we will definitely take them and use them as a teaching tool for us. As a reminder, all of the sessions in this room were recorded, so we will be sending out the recording sessions definitely by after Thanksgiving, if not by next week, but you will have them before the end of the month. And speaking of which, Thanksgiving is next week. It's kind of crazy, but I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope it's a blessed time with your family and friends. And I look forward to seeing you all next year, where we will hopefully be maskless and we will have double the capacity, and all of the colleagues that couldn't attend this year will be able to join us. Safe travels home. Thank you again for being here.